The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Miller's auto shop, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the gravel lot. I sat on the splintered wooden bench outside, my hands folded over the worn handle of my cane. The ache in my knees a dull reminder of 70 years well lived. The air smelled of oil and rust, and the faint hum of a radio drifted from inside the shop, where mechanics clinked tools and muttered to each other. My son, Daniel, had promised to be here by noon. It was now 3:30. I adjusted my faded cap, the one I'd worn since my days fixing cars myself, back when my hands were steady and my heart was full. Daniel had called me that morning, his voice clipped and distracted, saying his old Chevy was acting up against something about the transmission slipping. "Pop, can you wait at the shop? I'll swing by after my meeting," he'd said. I didn't ask what meeting. I'd stopped asking about his life years ago, when the distance between us grew too wide to bridge with questions. The bench creaked under my weight as I shifted, glancing at the road. No sign of his sleek black sedan, the one he'd bought after landing that corporate job in the city. I'd raised him in this dusty little town of Willow Creek, taught him how to change oil and swap spark plugs in our old garage. But he'd left all that behind. Left me behind, too, if I'm being honest. The calls came less often now, the visits even rarer. But when he asked for help, I showed up. Always did. A young mechanic, barely 20, poked his head out the shop door. "Mr. Harlan, you sure you don't want to come inside? Got coffee?" His name tag read Tommy. Nice kid, but his pity stung worse than the ache in my joints. "I'm fine out here, son," I said, forcing a smile. "Just waiting on Daniel." Tommy nodded, hesitating like he wanted to say more, then disappeared back inside. I leaned back, the bench digging into my spine, and let my mind wander. I thought of the garage I'd built behind our house, the one where Daniel and I used to spend Saturday mornings tinkering. He was 10 when he fixed his first carburetor, his small hands greasy and his grin wide enough to light up the whole damn town. Back then, I thought we'd always have those moments where the world was just us. A toolbox, and a car that needed fixing. But time has a way of slipping through your fingers. Daniel grew up, went to college, got a job that paid more in a month than I'd made in a year. He stopped coming home. The garage sat empty, collecting dust and memories. I'd walk in there sometimes, run my fingers over the old tools, and wonder where I went wrong. Was it the way I raised him? Too strict? Maybe. Or not strict enough? Or was it just life, pulling us apart like it does? The sun dipped lower, painting the sky orange. My watch read 4 o'clock. I pulled out my phone, ancient thing, barely held a charge and checked for messages. Nothing. Not a call. Not a text. Just the faint buzz of the shop's neon sign flickering to life as the day faded. I wasn't angry. Not at first. Disappointment settles slower, heavier, like sediment in a riverbed. I'd spent my life waiting for Daniel to come home, to call, to remember the man who'd given him everything. But sitting there, with the evening chill creeping into my bones, something shifted. Maybe it was the way the light hit the Chevy, parked alone in the lot, its hood propped open like a patient on an operating table. Maybe it was the realization that Daniel hadn't just left me waiting today, had been leaving me waiting for years. I stood, my knees protesting, and hobbled toward the shop. Tommy looked up from a workbench, wiping his hands on a rag. "You okay, Mr. Harlan?" "Tommy," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You know anyone with a tow truck? He blinked, confused. Yeah, my cousin's got one. Why? I looked out at the Chevy, its faded blue paint glinting in the dusk. I want you to tow that car to my place. Put it in my garage. Tommy's eyes widened. But, ain't that your son's car? It is, I said, feeling a spark of something I hadn't felt in years' defiance. Maybe. Or just the stubbornness of an old man tired of being forgotten. And I'm taking it home. The tow truck rumbled up to my house just as the stars began to prick the sky. My garage door groaned as I opened it, revealing the cluttered space I hadn't touched in months. The Chevy rolled in, its tires crunching against the concrete floor, and the driver, a burly guy with a beard like a briar patch, hooped it with a nod. You sure about this, Mr. Harlan? He asked, scratching his head. Never been sure, I said, handing him a crumpled 20 for his trouble. As the truck's taillights disappeared down the road, I stood in the garage, staring at the Chevy. It wasn't just a car. It was a piece of Daniel. A piece of the boy who used to sit on my shoulders and beg for stories about my days as a mechanic. And now it was here, in my space, where I could keep it safe. Where I could keep him safe. In some small way. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Daniel. Sorry. Pop. Meeting ran late. You still at the shop? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply button. For a moment, I thought about telling him the truth that his car was in my garage, that I was done waiting. But instead, I turned the phone off and set it on the workbench. Let him wonder. Let him feel what it's like to be left waiting. The garage smelled of oil and memories. And as I ran my hand over the Chevy's hood, I felt a flicker of purpose. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming something, maybe the car. Maybe my pride. Maybe the years I'd spent hoping for a son who'd stopped looking back. I didn't know what I'd do with the car yet. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was the one in the driver's seat. I grabbed a wrench from the toolbox, its weight familiar in my hand, and popped the hood. The transmission could wait. For now, I just wanted to work, to lose myself in the hum of metal and grease, the way I used to with Daniel by my side. The night stretched out ahead of me, quiet and full of possibility, and I got to it. The next morning, the garage was bathed in soft light filtering through the dusty window above the workbench. I'd stayed up later than I should have, tinkering with the Chevy's spark plugs, cleaning them more out of habit than necessity. My hands, gnarled as old tree roots, moved slower now, but they still knew the work. The car hadn't needed much, just a tune-up. Really, but I wasn't ready to let it go. Not yet. My phone sat silent on the workbench, still powered off from the night before. I hadn't checked it since Daniel's text. Hadn't wanted to face the inevitable questions or accusations. Instead, I'd lost myself in the rhythm of the garage, the clink of tools and the faint creak of the car's suspension as I adjusted it. It felt good to have purpose again, even if it was born out of something as petty as towing my son's car. Around 9, the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I wiped my hands on a rag and shuffled to the front door, my cane tapping against the hardwood. Through the peephole, I saw Daniel, his suit crisp and his face tight with irritation. He was 32 now, but the way his jaw clenched reminded me of the boy who'd stomp his foot when I told him to clean his room. I opened the door, and his eyes met mine, sharp and searching. Pop, where's my car? No greeting, no apology for yesterday. Just the question, laced with that city-bred impatience. In the garage, I said, keeping my voice even. You want coffee? He blinked, thrown off. What do you mean? In the garage. I left it at Miller's. You left me at Miller's, I said, turning toward the kitchen. Car's here now. Come in or don't. He followed, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. The kitchen smelled of the coffee I'd brewed an hour ago. Strong and bitter, the way I liked it. I poured 2 mugs, sliding one across the counter to him. He didn't touch it. Pop, what's going on? He asked, his voice softer now, but still edged with frustration. Tommy said you had the car towed last night. Why? I took a sip of my coffee, letting the silence stretch. How do you explain years of hurt in a single sentence? How do you tell your son that his absence has carved a hole in you? One you've filled with stubbornness and spite. You didn't show up, I said finally. I got tired of waiting. His brow furrowed. I told you I had a meeting. It ran late. I texted you. 4 hours late, I said, meeting his gaze. And a text ain't the same as showing up. Daniel. He opened his mouth, then closed it, like he was searching for the right words and coming up empty. I knew that look. I'd seen it when he was a teenager, caught sneaking out or skipping chores. Back then, I'd let it slide, too busy working to argue. Maybe that was my mistake, letting too much slide. I don't have time for this, he said, rubbing his temples. I need my car. Pop. I've got work. Then take it, I said, gesturing toward the garage. But you're gonna have to get it yourself. He stared at me, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. I wasn't. I turned and led the way to the garage, my cane tapping a steady rhythm. The Chevy sat where I'd left it, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. I cleaned it up some, polished the chrome until it shone like it did when Daniel first bought it. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes flicking from the car to me. You fixed it? He asked, almost a whisper. Didn't need much, I said. Transmission's fine. Just needed a little care. He stepped closer, running a hand over the hood. And for a moment, I saw the boy he used to beta, one who'd beg to help me in the garage, who'd laugh when I smeared grease on his nose. But then his phone buzzed, and the moment broke. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and sighed. I gotta go, he said. Thanks for this. He moved to open the car door, but I held up a hand. Hold on, I said. We ain't done. He froze, his hand on the handle. What now? You left me waiting. Daniel. Not just yesterday. For years. The words came out before I could stop them. Raw and heavy. I raised you in this house. In this garage. Taught you everything I knew. And you walked away. Never looked back. His face tightened. But he didn't argue. Maybe he couldn't. Pop. I ain't asking for much. I cut in. Just a little respect. A little time. You got a life out there. I get it. But I'm still here. Still your father. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with things unsaid. He looked at the car, then at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something like guilt in his eyes. I didn't mean to make you feel like that, he said quietly. Life got busy. Life's always busy, I said. But you make time for what matters. He nodded, slow, like he was chewing on the words. Then he opened the car door and slid inside. I thought he'd drive off, leave me standing there like always. But instead, he rolled down the window. "Pop," he said, "you want to come with me? Just for a drive?" I hadn't expected that. My chest tightened, and I gripped my cane a little harder to steady myself. "Yeah," I said, my voice rough. "Yeah, I'd like that." The Chevy purred as we pulled out of the driveway, the engine smoother than it had any right to be after years of city driving. Willow Creek rolled by outside the window-old houses with sagging porches. The diner where I used to take Daniel for milkshakes. The empty lot where the hardware store used to be. It was all familiar, but it felt different with him behind the wheel, like I was seeing it through his eyes. Neither of us spoke much at first. The radio played softly. Some country song about lost love and open roads. I stole glances at him, at the way his hands gripped the wheel. Confident but tense. He wasn't the boy I'd raised anymore. But he wasn't a stranger either. Somewhere in there was the kid who'd love this town. This car. This life. Where we headed? I asked finally. He shrugged. Nowhere special. Just driving. I nodded, settling back in the seat. For now. That was enough. The road stretched out ahead. A ribbon of asphalt cutting through fields of golden wheat, their stalks swaying in the late morning breeze. The Chevy's engine hummed, a steady rhythm that filled the silence between Daniel and me. I hadn't been on a drive like this in years. Not since he was a teenager and we'd take the old pickup out to the lake. Just the two of us. Fishing rods rattling in the bed. Back then, the silence was comfortable, filled with the ease of knowing we had time. Now, it felt fragile, like a cracked windshield waiting for one wrong bump to shatter. I glanced at Daniel. His eyes were fixed on the road, but his fingers tapped the steering wheel, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a kid. I wanted to ask him about his life, his job, his friends, whether he was happy, but the words felt too heavy, like they'd break whatever fragile thread was holding us together. You still fish? I asked instead, keeping my voice light. He looked at me, surprised, then shook his head. Haven't had time. City life. You know. I nodded, though I didn't know. I'd never left Willow Creek. Never wanted to. This town was my home. My roots sunk deep into its soil. Daniel. Thuft always been restless. Even as a boy. Always chasing something bigger. Something beyond the horizon. I'd hoped he'd find it. But looking at him now, I wasn't so sure. City's different, he said after a moment. Like he'd read my thoughts. Fast. Loud. Sometimes I miss this. He gestured at the fields. The open sky. The quiet. Then come back, I said, half joking, half hoping. Garage could use another pair of hands. He laughed. A short, sharp sound. You'd have me fixing cars again. I'm no good at that anymore. Pop. Too rusty. You'd pick it up, I said. It's like riding a bike. Muscle memory. He didn't answer, just kept driving, his eyes distant. I wondered what he saw out there, beyond the fields. A life he'd built, or one he was still chasing. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned back and let the hum of the engine fill the space. We drove for an hour, maybe more, looping through the back roads of Willow Creek. Past the old mill, shuttered now, its windows boarded up. Past the church where Daniel was baptized, its steeple still standing proud. Past the diner, where a few old-timers sat on stools, nursing coffee and stories. It was a small world. Mine. but it was enough. I wondered if Daniel ever thought about coming back. Not just for a visit, but for good. Eventually, he pulled over at a lookout point, a gravel patch overlooking the valley. The sun was high now, glinting off the river below. He cut the engine, and we sat there, the silence louder than the road had been. "Pop," he said finally, his voice low. "I'm sorry about yesterday. And everything else." I looked at him, surprised. He wasn't one for apologies. Never had been. "You don't gotta say that," I said, though my chest ached with the weight of his words. "No, I do," he said, turning to face me. "I've been a lousy son. I know that." He paused, running a hand through his hair. I didn't realize how much I was leaving behind. I swallowed, my throat tight. "You were chasing your dreams," I said. "I never faulted you for that." "Maybe I shouldn't have chased so hard," he said, almost to himself. "I thought I needed to get out, to make something of myself. But I don't even know what that means anymore." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd spent my life fixing cars, raising a son, loving a woman who'd been gone 10 years now. My dreams were small, grounded, but they'd been enough. Daniel's dreams, though they were bigger than Willow Creek, bigger than me. And I'd let him go, thinking that's what fathers do. Maybe I'd been wrong. "You still got time," I said, "to figure it out." He nodded, staring out at the valley. "Maybe." We sat there a while longer, watching the river catch the light. For the first time in years, I felt like I had my son back, even if just for a moment. When he started the car again, I didn't ask where we were going. It didn't matter. We were together, and that was enough. Back at the house, Daniel parked the Chevy in the driveway, not the garage. "I'll leave it here," he said, climbing out. "Easier to get to." I nodded, leaning on my cane. "You heading back to the city?" "Yeah," he said, but there was a hesitation in his voice. "Got work tomorrow, but maybe I'll come back next weekend, if that's okay." I smiled, a real one this time. Doors always open. He hugged me then, quick and awkward, like he wasn't sure how to do it anymore. I clapped him on the back, feeling the strength in his shoulders. The boy he'd been and the man he'd become. "Drive safe," I said. He nodded, climbed into his sedan, and drove off, the taillights fading into the dusk. I stood there a long time, watching the road, feeling lighter than I had in years. The Chevy sat in the driveway, a quiet reminder of what we'd reclaimed, even if it was just a piece of what we'd lost. The next few days passed quietly, the way they always did in Willow Creek. I woke early, made coffee, and spent my mornings in the garage, tinkering with the Chevy. It didn't need much work. Spark plugs were clean, oil changed, tires rotated, but I kept at it, finding small things to fix, small ways to keep my hands busy. The truth was, I didn't want to let go of the car. It felt like a tether to Daniel, a way to hold on to the moment we'd shared on that drive. I'd left my phone on the workbench, still powered off. I wasn't ready to face the world outside the garage. Not yet. The town went on around, my neighbors waving as they mowed their lawns, the mailman dropping off bills and catalogs, but I stayed in my bubble. The hum of the radio and the clink of tools my only company. On the third day, Tommy from the mechanic shop stopped by. He stood in the garage doorway, his cap twisted in his hands. "Mr. Harlan," he said, "just checking in. You doing okay?" I looked up from the Chevy's engine, wiping sweat from my brow. Doing fine, Tommy. Just keeping busy. He nodded, glancing at the car. Heard from Daniel? Not yet, I said, though I wasn't worried. He'd said he'd come back, and for the first time in years, I believed him. You want a soda? Got some in the fridge. Tommy grinned, relaxing a little. Sure. We sat on a pair of old lawn chairs outside the garage, sipping root beer and watching the clouds drift by. Tommy was a good kid, eager to learn, with a knack for engines that reminded me of myself at his age. We talked shop for a while: carburetors, fuel injectors, the best way to clean a rusty bolt. It felt good, like passing a torch I hadn't realized I was still holding. You ever think about teaching? Tommy asked, out of the blue. Like, officially. The shop could use someone like you. A lot of us young guys don't know half what you do. I laughed, surprised. Teach? I'm too old for that, son. Besides, who'd listen to an old coot like me? Plenty of folks, he said. Serious. You've got stories, Mr. Harlan. Experience. That's worth something. I didn't know what to say to that. Teaching had never crossed my mind, not in a formal way. I'd taught Daniel, sure, but that was different. That was family. Still, the idea stuck with me, like a seed planted in soft soil. Maybe there was something I could still give, something beyond fixing cars in my garage. Tommy left after a while, promising to swing by again. I went back to the Chevy, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about Daniel, about the drive, about the years we'd lost. I thought about Tommy's words, about passing on what I knew. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a purpose beyond waiting. That evening, I turned my phone back on. A half-dozen texts from Daniel popped up, sent over the past few days. Hey, Pop. You okay? Sorry. Got caught up at work. Planning to come by Saturday. Cool. I smiled, my thumb brushing the screen. He was trying. Maybe not as hard as I wanted, but he was trying. I texted back, Saturday's good. Bring coffee. Then I set the phone down and went back to the garage. The Chevy was nearly perfect now, but I found one last thing to fix: a loose belt that squeaked just enough to notice. As I tightened it, I thought about what I'd say to Daniel when he came back. Not just about the car, but about us. About the years we'd let slip by, and the ones we still had left. The sun set, painting the garage in shades of gold and shadow. I stood back, admiring the Chevy, and felt a quiet pride. Not just in the car, but in myself. I'd taken a stand, towed that damn car into my garage, and somehow, it had brought us here. To a new start. Maybe. Or at least a chance to try. Saturday morning dawned clear and cool. The kind of day that made Willow Creek feel like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I was up early, as always, brewing coffee and sweeping out the garage. The Chevy gleamed under the fluorescent lights, a testament to the hours I'd poured into it. I'd even waxed it yesterday, the blue paint shining like it had rolled off the lot. It wasn't just a car, Anna Maria, it was a bridge. A way back to Daniel. He pulled into the driveway at 10. Right on time. His sedan kicking up a puff of dust. He stepped out, holding 2 cups of coffee from the diner. And for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been: gangly, eager, always bringing me something to share. Morning, Pop, he said, handing me a cup. Black. 2 sugars. Right. You remembered, I said, taking a sip. It was perfect. We stood there a moment. Awkward, but not uncomfortable. The coffee warm in our hands. Car looks good, he said, nodding toward the Chevy. You've been busy. Had to keep her running, I said. She's a good one. He smiled. A real one. Not the tight-lipped city version. Yeah. She is. We moved to the garage, and I showed him what I'd done. New spark plugs. Fresh oil. A Titan belt. He listened, nodding, asking questions like he used to when he was a kid. It wasn't much, but it felt like a start. Like maybe we could rebuild something. Piece by piece. The way you rebuild an engine. Pop, he said after a while, leaning against the workbench. I've been thinking. About what you said. About making time. I looked at him, my heart thudding. Yeah. I want to do better, he said. I don't know how yet, but I want to try. Maybe come back more often. Help out around here. I nodded, not trusting my voice. It wasn't a promise. Not exactly. But it was more than I'd had in years. I'd like that, I said finally. Garage could use you. He laughed, shaking his head. I'm rusty. Pop. You'd have to teach me all over again. I'm a patient man, I said, and we both smiled, the tension easing like a loosened bolt. We spent the morning in the garage, not fixing anything, just talking. About cars, about Willow Creek, about the life he'd built in the city. He told me about his job, long hours, high stress, but good money. He told me about a woman he'd been seeing, someone named Claire, who liked hiking and old movies. I listened, soaking it in, piecing together the man my son had become. Around noon, we took the Chevy out again, this time to the diner. We sat in a booth by the window, eating burgers and fries, the jukebox playing something soft and twangy. The other regulars nodded at me, their eyes lingering on Daniel, like they were surprised to see him here. I couldn't blame them. I was surprised, too. You ever think about moving to the city? He asked, dipping a fry in ketchup. It's not so bad. Lots to do. I shook my head. This is home, I said. Always will be. But you're welcome to visit anytime. He nodded, his eyes soft. I will. That afternoon, we worked on the Chevy together, just like old times. I showed him how to check the brake pads, how to listen for the telltale hum of a worn bearing. He was rusty, like he'd said, but he picked it up fast, his hands remembering what his mind had forgotten. We laughed. We swore at stubborn bolts. We got grease on our shirts. It was the best day I'd had in years. When the sun started to dip, Daniel stood back, wiping his hands on a rag. I should head back soon, he said, but there was no rush in his voice. Work tomorrow. Yeah, I said, though I didn't want him to go. You take care of yourself. Okay. I will, he said. And Pop. Thanks. For everything. He hugged me again. Longer this time. And I held on tight, feeling the years slip away. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright, like he was holding something back. See you next weekend, he asked. Count on it, I said. He climbed into the Chevy, not his sedan, and I watched him drive off, the car's taillights glowing in the dusk. I stood there a long time, my cane steady against the gravel, feeling like I'd gotten something back. Not just my son, but a piece of myself, too. The weeks that followed felt different, like the air had shifted in Willow Creek. Daniel kept his word, coming back the next weekend, and the one after that. He'd show up with coffee, sometimes donuts, and we'd spend the day in the garage, working on the Chevy or just talking. It wasn't perfect. There were still silences, still moments where the distance between us felt wide, but it was progress. And that was enough. One Saturday, he brought Claire, the woman he'd mentioned. She was tall, with kind eyes and a laugh that filled the room. She didn't know much about cars, but she listened as we worked, asking questions and passing tools. I liked her. She had a warmth that reminded me of my late wife, a way of making you feel seen. When Daniel looked at her, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Hope. Maybe. Or something close to it. Pop, he said that evening, as we sat on the porch with beers, Claire inside making tea. I've been thinking about moving closer. Not right away, but maybe next year. There's a branch office in Riverton, only an hour away. I raised an eyebrow, trying to keep my voice steady. That's so? Yeah, he said, staring out at the darkening sky. I'm tired of the city. Tired of running all the time. I don't know. Something real. I nodded, my chest tight. You'll always have a place here, I said. You and Claire both. He smiled, and for the first time, it felt like he believed me. Months later, the Chevy was still in my garage, but it wasn't alone anymore. Daniel had started bringing his tools over, setting up a corner of the workbench for himself. We'd work side by side, sometimes on his car, sometimes on old projects I'd dug out of storage. Tommy started coming by, too, eager to learn, and I found myself teaching again, just like he'd suggested. It wasn't formal, just a few hours here and there, but it felt right. Like I was giving something back to the town that had given me so much. One evening, as the three of us worked on an old Ford pickup a neighbor had dropped off, Daniel looked at me and said, "You know, Pop, I'm glad you towed my car." I laughed, surprised. Yeah, thought you were pissed. I was, he said, grinning. But it woke me up, made me see what I was missing. I didn't say anything, just nodded. But inside, I felt a warmth I hadn't known in years. The garage was full again, not just with tools and cars, but with people, with purpose. I'd spent so long waiting for Daniel to come back, but maybe I'd been waiting for myself, too. For the man who'd raised a son, built a life, and never stopped believing in second chances. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the garage, I looked at Daniel, at Tommy, at the Chevy gleaming under the lights. This was my home, my legacy. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd done right by it.